Thank you for coming. I'm Colin Sprague. I'm the IT director, if I haven't met you before. Thank you for being here. We're all excited that we're actually kicking this off. The high schools are the lucky ones to kind of kick it off for ABC, so we're excited to dive in. And very simply, what we have planned is a two-session process. Today's the first one. And then next month, we'll get back together and meet again. Today, we want to have you think about what is a 21st century classroom all about. A little bit of education. Irene, my partner, has done a wonderful job putting together some information to share. We have survey data. You might recall we sent out a survey. We had about 130 teachers answer that. We'll show you what people are saying out there about our classrooms and their perceived needs. We are going to introduce you to Ryan Carter, who's right here. You may have heard the name or see Ryan. Ryan is the bond manager for ABC. He works for ABC, and anything to do with the bond is going to go through Ryan. So he's here with his team, and he's going to introduce his team in just a little bit and go over some really important parameters about this whole project that you need to know. Irene is going to involve you in an activity today to kind of consider some of the survey data, to kind of consider what your school site independently feels is important to your school when it comes to creating a world-class classroom. Because you all have some unique ideas, and the whole point of today is to get all those ideas onto the table with the bond team here, with our architects here, the construction manager. They're all here to listen and kind of understand. And then next month, based on all the input that we gather, they will come back with some proposed package options. They'll probably have more options than we'll be allowed to maintain. We can't have 15 options. But we might be able to have 2 to 3 options for our secondary schools. So if you're a secondary school, you might like option A for 30% of your classrooms because it makes perfect sense, but it won't make sense in another area. So maybe, but that's all independently kind of chosen by your team. And those packages would be created and crafted in large part based on what you're saying your vision is for your school. And we're going to collectively put it together. And we're going to do that so that we have standardized ABC world-class classrooms. So that teacher from GAR can go to Cerritos, and they're in a world-class classroom. Parity. That's all part of the bond, and this is a major first step of achieving that. So thank you for being here. We'll get started. I'll introduce you to Ryan Carter, and he'll kick us off.
Thank you. All right, thank you everybody for joining us this afternoon. I appreciate all of your time. I know it's hard to get you all in the same room at the same time. So we'd like to start with just some basic introductions. Myself, I'm Ryan Carter. I'm the bond program manager for the district. I brought with me today Richard Ingracia. He is with Racklin Partners. He's the principal architect with the firm. He's been assisting us with developing the implementation plan, and he will be further assisting us with developing the packages for the classrooms as we move through this process. I've also brought with me today David Buted with Tilden Coil Constructors. They will be the construction managers for the bulk of the work we're doing in the bond program. So on a site level, as when we start construction, David will be the liaison between myself and the contractors and yourselves. I have a brief slide. We'll talk about bond timelines today, just in a brief summary, and I'll go over, again, like Colin had mentioned, the purpose of this meeting is for our vision, to define our vision for the classrooms and identifying the technology and packages for those rooms. One of the main things that I'm using as a basis for prioritizing our projects in each of the schools through the bond program is the steps in the facilities master plan. And I'm sure a lot of you are familiar with this, but if you aren't, we created the steps in the master plan, and this is a guideline, like I said, for how we're going to prioritize all of our work, starting with safety and security. First and foremost, if you have noticed on the implementation plan, which I'll show you the timelines here shortly, security is going to happen in all schools district-wide right away. So we're going through currently and doing assessments through all of our school sites to find the items that need to be implemented to get us to that level of security that we've discussed here throughout the bond program. Secondly, technology. That's part of what we're discussing today, is what is the technology going to look like in our classrooms and the infrastructure of that technology. Evolution, what do the 21st century classroom environments look like? Again, what we're going to be working on today. Parity. So in this process, we have to make sure that we're not creating too many anomalies, that we are creating parity between the design from the first school to the last school. So getting us all together, even though your school may not be first, your school may be a little later in the program, we want to make sure your input is given here in the beginning to where your needs are also met throughout these standards we're creating here. Finally, we have sustainability, so that would be things like solar, renewable energy, which would be further down the line for our priorities. The objectives, this is language that we pulled right out of the facilities master plan. So this was language that was given to the voters prior to the bond being voted upon. And some of the objectives for the 21st classroom that were mentioned was to increase academic achievement through facilities upgrades, which would be part of the modernization work that we're doing. Enhance technology to improve teaching and learning, so increasing our technology infrastructure and technology that's available to students. And also transforming our classrooms into 21st or now 22nd century classrooms. So this is the broad overview I talked about for the implementation plan for our first two bond sales. We are beginning at all campuses with safety and security. So that's going to cover all 30 campuses that we have in ABC. And we're going to, again, focus on, based on that survey that we're doing at each site, we're going to take that information and develop a scope to make sure we hit all those security points at every campus. Elementary schools are getting shade shelters and playgrounds as part of Quick Start projects. So we'll be addressing that at all 19 of our elementary schools right off the bat here. And then our first two high schools, which will receive a complete modernization based on the master plan and the steps, would be Artesia and Whitney High School. And those two high schools, part of our implementation plan, we had multiple options what we presented to the board. What was decided on was to do holistic site-based projects. So when you see here Artesia High School, Whitney, Cerritos, Gar, ABC Adult, and Tracy High School, this duration, this is to complete all work that will be happening at that campus within this bond program. So instead of coming and doing a little piece each year and possibly keeping your campuses under construction for 9 years or more, we have collectively decided to go with a plan that's going to take it all out in one kind of fell swoop. We'll design it, build it, and then leave and be done with the final product. So this is our basic timeline. As you see, we kind of have some overlapping here, and that's because we want to keep the momentum of the program going as much as we possibly can. It's a cash flow issue, why you see multiple different staggered schedules, because we have bond sale A and we have bond sale B, and later on we'll have C and D, which will complete the entire $258 million. So what we shared with you today, what I'm sharing with you today, is what has already been vetted out through the Board of Trustees. Again, out of the facilities master plan, here's the 3 items that we're going to be touching on today that we're trying to extract from this group. Number 1 is technology. In the facilities master plan, it defines that technology as upgrading classroom technology to 21st century standards. Large screen monitors, lighting controls, sound systems, one-to-one student computers, and improved wireless support. This is not completely inclusive of everything that technology would be in your classrooms, but it's a good starting point. So these are some of the items that we're going to be looking for feedback from this group today. Classroom finishes, upgrading interior spaces, so the flooring that we're choosing in the classroom, the walls, the wall coverings, ceiling surfaces, and sustainable finishes. So making sure that we're all in agreement with what the classroom should look and feel like, because that does have an effect on the educational environment. Finally, classroom furniture. So replacing older furniture with contemporary 21st century classroom desks, chairs, and other items in the classroom to make the environment flexible, movable, and up to date with the most current standards. So these are the main items that this group is going to talk about today, and hopefully at the end of this we can come to some, not necessarily consensus, but extract most of the main points that we would like to see using this as a guideline for each one of these areas, and use that, develop packages with my team, with the architectural team, and then bring those back to you at a later meeting and go through and hopefully create that standard so we have some sort of parity between all the schools. Now, from here, I'm going to hand things over to Irene, who's going to go through and talk about what those different areas can look like and what some of those options are. Because we may or may not be privy to everything that's out there and available to us. So part of what we're going to do today is educate this group on the different options that are out there, and we'll go through a little exercise after you get to hear that information to maybe put down on paper some of the things that really resonate with you and would be applicable to your campuses. So without further ado, I'll introduce Irene and let her kind of take it from here.
First of all, we really like to thank you for being here, with us today. Thank you so much. Number one is what your feedback is really going to help inform Ryan was just saying, really every classroom in ABC in the secondary and adult school, because there's going to be a same process, but it's going to be a little bit different when we get into middle schools and elementary schools. The first thing is I'd like to invite you, we will be working on a collaborative activity. So if you have access to a device or if you'd like a Chromebook, then this is the bit.ly that will place you on the agenda so that everything will bounce off from this agenda. We're going to talk about the functions of 21st century classrooms, and this is again just curated material basically on peer review, articles, research, just everything that's out there for 21st centuries that we could kind of find and curate that information into something that could help or may help you kind of define what those parameters may be for the classrooms. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and start again from this agenda. If you have a device or you'd like to take that bit.ly, and I'm going to go ahead and move into the classroom. Okay. Right. So we know that classroom design, more than ever, is really fundamental. It's really fundamental in trying to make learning first. Today, what we hope to do with all of you is really explore some of the functions that are served in 21st century classrooms. Then number two, we'd like to get all your information, your feedback. What is your purpose of the classroom? What do you see, what elements are important and critical? What's going to facilitate teaching and learning in these environments? And then once you provide that feedback, we're going to take all the feedback, all that information, and turn it over to the architects. We're going to create packages based on the elements that you have identified. They're going to come back and share these packages with you. And then you get to say, well, this makes sense, this doesn't, so that they can better combine several choices of packages for the classrooms. Okay. So we're going to start with the purpose first. So, talking about designing a space, it's really what is the purpose? And so we look at ground zero by saying that the purpose of all these amazing 21st century environments in the classroom are geared from our standards. Because our standards call for 21st century learning, because ISTE, because of the 4 Cs and so on, college and career readiness. And that comes down and drills down into the classroom. That's why it's really important that we do now. The other thing is that we have to prepare our students for the 21st century. More and more, the educational system is being asked to prepare students for 21st century competencies so that they're ready to be employable. And so these are the critical ones that are at the top of almost every single research study that has been done, in the past from about 2012 on. They have identified these items to be the top skills. So when we start looking at what makes up a 21st century classroom, this again is just a piece of gathered information, and these are the characteristics that were assigned to be the top. And these are again are national, global, and everywhere else. This is the consensus. So a classroom as a 21st century environment needs to be differentiated, there needs to be collaboration, flexibility, and so on. This will kind of also help you start thinking of your spaces, not that you don't, you're already doing an amazing job teaching in your spaces, but this will kind of help you design what activities are happening in my classroom that are now going to translate into the design. So this is a pop quiz. Okay. How much does classroom design affect student learning? Right? I was shocked when I read that, and there's so many studies on it that I was like, really? Yes, and they talk about 25% of the academic learning can be attributed to the design of a classroom, believe it or not. So that was my takeaway. I was like, wow, that says a lot. And this is over the course of an academic year, and of course it could be a little bit different, right, for every school and every site. But what we want you to really, the focus, I guess, before we start the activity is really to kind of think about what is that purpose of the space first. Is that space going to be a learning space? What behaviors do you want to promote in that space? Is it student-centered? Is it student-driven? What is necessary to make those things happen? What's the purpose in that classroom? So again, we're looking at just what is the goal of that space, those classrooms. Now, based on, again, the information, these are the kind of, we condensed it into, there's 5 basic spaces. So one is the space for instruction, direct instruction. Number 2 is the spaces that there are to collaborate, where students get together and collaborate. 3 is spaces where they actually create. So it's actually could look like either STEM, it could be robotics, it could be engineering, it could be something else. Then we have spaces that showcase their learning. So it's not a typical actually showcase that you see, but they're spaces dedicated so that students can extend their learning and reflect upon their learning. And then spaces for quiet. All right. So what does it mean, spaces for direct instruction? That for a 21st century direct instruction to happen, there needs to be mobility. Teacher needs to be able to go up and down and make sure. Now, I'm not going to go through every one of these bullet points. You could refer to them later. But you could see that when this happens, when there's mobility, the teacher is able to stand up, they're able to move around, then they could facilitate discussions, they could lead. These are spaces that are needed in a classroom. Every teacher needs to be able to have a place where they can actually provide direct instruction. And these are some of the pieces that go with it. Now, direct instruction doesn't necessarily have a front of the classroom, right? It could be teacher-led, but there's multiple areas that is visibility and that the students can have focal points and everybody can see what the teacher is actually directing and lecturing on. Then we have spaces to collaborate. And again, that kind of talks about visibility, accessibility for all, dynamic, where the students are seeing things change in real time. It also talks about collaborative surfaces, where students can gather around and brainstorm, and they're actually with doing teamwork, and they're looking at revisions and doing their group. That would be a collaborative space. It has whiteboards and so on. And as you can see here in the drawings, these are some of the spaces of what collaboration. And so you see areas where you do have the mobile displays around the areas where students can gather and center. We have writable walls across, different types of furniture. And then we have spaces to create. And this is a place where students can amplify their voice. They're taking their learning further into another step. They're looking at inquiry, discovery, collaboration at the same. But this may be a better equipped place if they had elongated tables, or they have different types of large visual displays. They have access to multimedia. So these spaces look a little different because, again, they're refining, they're reflecting, they're producing information. So what's needed may look a little different than in a collaboration space or a direct instruction space. Again, these are kind of more geared to being places that we can innovate, and they do look like probably specific classrooms in your high schools where it could be science, it could be robotics, engineering, and so on. So this is another branch, right, for the classrooms. Now, spaces that include, that we call showcasing, it's really about where they demonstrate the journey. So these are areas that are also dedicated, that are accessible by others, which could be the community, could be in a multimedia center, could be a different, but it includes task board surfaces, places that are actually showcased, where students come in and they are developing their concepts of what they are actually working on. And this is one example of where these showcase spaces could be against the walls, against different areas that could have multi-purposes as well. And now we go to spaces for quiet. So this is kind of attributes for independent learning, where the student really intentionally has these individual areas they can go use for reflection. They can actually provide a sense of ownership for the student. They can make decisions, they can work quietly and independently and take. So we have to make sure that those areas are somehow part of, most collaboration areas as well. So here we have kind of some of the areas that we have as reflective spaces with comfortable different types of colors. So based on the information, Brian kind of went over the types of packages that we're going to be looking at. So there's three kind of categories if you want to categorize them as technology, the classroom finishes, and also the furniture. We want you to start with the purpose first. So what am I going to do, or what the consensus does my school need? What kind of focuses do we have? What is the purpose of our classrooms? That will depend and guide you into, this is the type of flooring that makes sense for us. This is the types of desks, or, is it dry ease? Is it not dry ease? Is it elevated? Is it not elevated? Is it, depending on the choices and the purpose that you have, this will guide you into what those critical elements would be of a 21st century environment. Now, what we'd like you to do, this is the biggest and actually most exciting part, because this is where you are going to tell us what you feel makes up this classroom. What are those key elements that would make the learning and teaching happening in your classroom? So we're going to gather around in groups in a minute, but I just want to walk you a little bit through it. So if I go ahead here with Artesia, right, here's the link. The Artesia team is going to work together. What we have done, let me enlarge that a little bit so you can see it a little bit better. Okay. So step one is just, we have provided a breakdown of the survey responses. So we send out a survey to all ABC teachers and staff, and we ask them to let us know what they feel, how they prioritize, what they feel was important elements or what weren't important elements. And at the bottom, you're also going to see results about what spaces are most important. And direct instruction and collaboration were definitely in the top. But as you see here, you're going to see that out of close to 130 responses, 83 ranked audio controls as being the top. So that's needed in a classroom. Now, you don't necessarily have to agree or disagree with and that's more for information, but what we'd like you to do is, in this area here, start with your purpose. Okay, what makes sense? Does audio controls make sense in your spaces? Do they not? What kind of audio controls? Is it a voice amplification system? Is it something different? And if there's something as you go along, this is just the technology part, and I'm going to scroll up a little bit so you can see. If I scroll up a little bit further, right, you're going to see the classroom finishes, which is the walls, the flooring, and natural light. You can add others. And then again, we move further down to the actual furniture. And what we would like for you is to sit with your team, collaborate together, come up with your own takeaways of your purpose. So establish a purpose first. What do we need to have in our classroom? What's important? Once you have these elements, also let us know what we didn't consider that you feel is important. Maybe we left something out that for you it really makes sense. Now we want to establish, remember, cross parity that we were talking about, these standard packages, but we want this activity to be reflective of your site. What are your needs? What do you see? Because these are the elements that are going to be included in those packages. At the end, we're going to stop and then we're going to have a share out. And then you should share with us what those key elements were in technology. We'll move on to the finishes, and then at the end we'll do the furniture. And then you get to tell us what you felt was critical based on your purpose and need of those classrooms. Any questions? Now again, the presentation and slides are available to you. There's only two things I want to move back on the presentation just to share really quickly before we actually break out. So we were looking at the functions of the environments here, right? And so additionally, if you keep going through the presentation, you're going to see again the principle, the pedagogical activity that goes with it, and also the type of setting that supports. Further down, there's also information about how light is very important beyond the space and how it's attributes in the colors. Okay? Those are just kind of for reference if you want to browse through it. And somebody could be browsing and other people can be typing continuously. You could have one reporter. It's up to your group, and then one to share out with us. But I just wanted to share that those were included at the very bottom as well. So we hope that a little bit of this curated material helps you better design your 21st century environment, establish a purpose, and then move forward and identifying what those elements are for each of you. Any questions? No? Okay. So what we're going to do is then, if you're in this presentation, I hope you all are, and if you're not, let me know and we'll make sure that you're there. You're going to click on your site. Each of you will have a document that's just dedicated to your team. So you could all open it, you can share it, whatever you'd like to do, but you will all have editing access. Once you select that, then you guys can work together. We'll give you, I believe on the agenda, it's till about let's see here, till about 4:10, okay? So then at about 4:10, we're gonna go ahead and stop, and then we'll kind of have the share out and you guys can share with us.